Alrighty, so now we're going to talk about the Houston Dynamo in the season preview. So last season, it was definitely a season where it feels like the Dynamo were back. They were back to being at their best, not only making the playoffs again, but kind of gone on a bit of a dark horse slash Cinderella run all the way to the Western Conference Final, where unfortunately they lost to LAFC. Now, obviously, when you make that great of a run into the playoffs, it's obviously going to be interesting how expectation is going to be. And we'll definitely talk about that of how, as much as I know Dynamo fans will say that they want to make sure that they get themselves back into that stage. Yeah, it's not always that easy to do, especially with the way that we have seen teams before make those incredible run deep into the playoffs, and especially with the way that I also mentioned that they're doing a very Dynamo thing in the off season, which is not making any signing whatsoever. I would say that it's not going to be easy for them to make it back to the Western Conference Final like they did last season. But that being said, last season they did finish with 14-9-11 record and finished with 51 points, finishing fourth in the Western Conference. Their last playoff appearance was last year. Their last playoff round wins was also last year. In fact, if they didn't make it to the playoffs and also didn't win a playoff round, the last time that they made the playoffs was all the way back in 2017. I mean, it's been a long time since the Dynamo had made it to the playoffs. They finally ended that one of the longest active playoff drought that any team has had, and not only that, they also won a playoff game in process. In fact, winning two playoff game in process. Two playoff round that is. They technically won three playoff game because they won two into the first round to move on into the second round, and then they won another to get themselves in the Western Conference Final. And then in terms of MLS Cup, yeah, it's 2007 and 2006, and obviously as a Quakes fan, still very bitter about what happened in those years that the Dynamo went back to back to start their I wouldn't say new life in MLS because that team was relocated from San Jose during the 2006 season. Now, in terms of players that they bought in, yeah, like I said, they pretty much have not made any signing whatsoever, and this feels like it's a very Houston Dynamo move, and this is where Dynamo fans are very frustrated with how the club sometimes run, where they just don't really make reinforcement, even though it feels like maybe now we're starting to once again see the conservative approach by this ownership group and in this front office that after what we had last season, let's try to run it back and see how it's gonna go. In fact, their only signing so far is literally a player that they got in the draft instead Spawn and fee, and even though he's actually from the draft, I haven't heard that officially they have offered him a full-time contract, as we see with some of these players picked in the super draft. So in other words, they basically have not signed anybody whatsoever, and we are now into the 29th of January. And in terms of the players that is no longer with the team, there's a couple of big outbound on their team too. You got Corey Bear, who's going to go to FC Cincinnati. You got For Olferson going back to Europe and going to Hungary, that is. Then you got Juan Castilla, Teenage Hadibi, Mateus Vea, Beto Villa, Ivan Franco. Of course, his loan was not renewed, if I recall. And then you have Jinson Vendikas also was on loan with this team, but they decided to not renew his loan. So yeah, they definitely lost some key pieces in this team. Obviously, I think the biggest piece they lost out of all of them is got to be Corey Bear. I mean, that's a sell that I was expecting that he was going to get another chance for a big club like FC Cincinnati, but you would think that they would have hold on from him, considering the fact that he was second on the list in terms of the top goal scorer on this team and just had probably his best year that he has had in terms of goal scoring since his rookie season with Real Salt Lake. Now, in terms of the preseason schedule, now on the website, it's listed that the only preseason game that they're playing is Orlando City on February 14th, and that, of course, is a closed door match. But from what I heard, they are going to get some more preseason matches. They've already are talking about how they're going to go down to Mexico and they're going to be playing a couple of preseason game against Mexican opponent, but they didn't mention which Mexican opponent that they're gonna face. So for now, officially their preseason schedule is against Orlando City, but they are gonna get a couple of friendlies, as I mentioned, with them down in Mexico. And like what I said in the last season preview, the Houston Dynamo, of course, they are going to be playing in the CONCACAF Champions Cup against St. Louis City. In the first leg, it's going to be on February 20th, and then in the second leg is February 27th. And like I said, but before, it's kind of a shame if you're a Houston Dynamo fans, like what I said about St. Louis fans, that you're so excited to be back into the competition and you get to face against a team in the CONCACAF region, only to realize that you're going to be facing it against an MLS team. I mean, there's just no fun in terms of that, and especially a lot of Dynamo fans will not only won't be happy that they're playing just kind of a vanilla MLS team, but the fact that the kickoff of the second leg of that game against St. Louis is going to be 9:30 p.m. Central Time, and it's on a weekdays too. That is insane. Like that is absolutely insane. The fact that they decided to schedule the game at 9:30, and I will not be surprised if there's gonna like Houston has always been a team that struggle in terms of attendance. I will not be surprised. We might not even get like 1,000 fans inside the stadium. It will be just almost that game will kind of maybe feel like COVID vibes because of the fact that you just don't schedule a game on a weekday in Houston at 9:30. Expect people is going to show up for the game, even if that game has big meaning of who's going to be moving on into the second round. So again, whoever scheduled that around that time, absolutely insane kind of kickoff time, and I don't blame the fact that maybe some Houston fans are not going to show up for that because imagine going to a game on a school night or even on a work week and it starts at 9:30 p.m. Local time. Now, in terms of the first 10 games for the Houston Dynamo, so besides that crazy kickoff that they have against St. Louis City, on February 24th, they kick off the season against Sporting KC. And what a kickoff of the season that would be. That would be one of the more interesting season opener that we see in the opening weekend of MLS with them facing against Sporting KC. And it's a rematch of last year, second round matchup in the Western Conference. Then they play against the New York Red Bulls at home, and then they play against the Portland Timbers. So again, Houston getting a pretty heavy home start to the schedule, which means you would expect this team should be good at least coming out of the gate because home form has always been a key thing for this Houston Dynamo team. Then they go on the road to play against the Colorado Rapids before playing at home against the San Jose Earthquakes. Then they do go on the road against Chicago before going on the road against Minnesota. Then they return home to play Texas Derby against Austin FC. Well, actually, this is not the Texas Derby, but this is a Copa Tias match. In fact, they're going to have back-to-back Copa Tias match, first with Austin, and then they play the Texas Derby against FC Dallas, and then they return home, play against St. Louis City. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting start. I mean, there are some tough games out there. There are some easy game, but with the way that Houston has definitely got a lot of home games to start the season, you would expect that this team should be maybe getting off to a decent start, especially when you look at the first 5 games of the season. You would expect that there's a chance that they could win every one of them. I mean, even the road game against Colorado. Yes, I know the Rapids have improved this season, but still, that could be a game that the Dynamo can win, considering they've also been able to get road wins against Colorado. In fact, that was the place that ended that long active or at least that was one of the places where it kind of ended a stretch where they had a long period without winning a single game on the road. And then looking at the last 9 games, and this is the post Leeds Cup and how their schedule is going to look like. From now on, instead of me putting the last 9 games, I'm just gonna put post Leeds Cup break because there's no point saying the last 9 games if all the games are basically post Leeds Cup. So in the post Leeds Cup game, their first game is against Toronto FC. Then they have to go on the road in that Western Conference final rematch against LAFC before returning home to play against RSL. Then they play against the Vancouver Whitecaps at home, but then they have the other Copa Tias match, and I think this is the final Copa Tias match of this year against Austin FC on September 21st. Then they go on the road again to play against the Seattle Sounders before playing New England, St. Louis on the road, and the LA Galaxy at home to finish the season. So yeah, when you look at that last 9 games in their post Leeds Cup break, That's a really tough schedule. I mean, from I think probably the easiest game is playing at home against Toronto FC because after that, I mean, those home games you would say that they have a chance to win, but when you look at those road games that they have, I mean, against LAFC, against defending Western Conference champion, against Austin FC. Austin as always tends to have a good record against Houston when they're playing at home. Go on the road against the Seattle Sounders, that could be daunting, and then going on the road to St. Louis is even more daunting. So this is where, if you're the Houston Dynamo, and we've seen this before with the narrative where the Houston Dynamo get off to a good start and then they just kind of faded away as the season goes along. Don't be surprised we might be seeing the same narrative with the way that they have a really tough schedule to finish off the season, especially post Leeds Cup break. Now, in terms of the strength of this team, it's got to be the midfield and the defense. I mean, when you look at this midfield, if Hector Herrera can have almost a replicate of last season, where last season he really turned back the clock in terms of not only be a guy that recorded 17 assists, which I believe that's the most assists anybody has recorded in the league, but he is the guy that Houston, when they decide to get Herrera. Part of that is to get butts in the seat because you're getting a guy that is very recognizable in the L3 fan base, but also the fact that you want him to produce for you, especially in that deep line playmaking in part, and he did that and then some. And you're hoping he's gonna do the same thing, but in other position, I mean, Coco Carrasquilla is still here, even though there's been a lot of rumblings about him potentially moving on, especially there's rumors that he's probably going to be going down to Club America as a potential transfer. Yeah, as long as he's still there and he can replicate what he did last season, that could means that this midfield can be strong, and especially other part of midfield like Artur, who if he continued to defeat Father Time and had another good season, that midfield looks really stacked. And I haven't even gone to the number 10 position with Aman Bassi having a really good season last year. And then of course the defense, like I said, last season it was rock solid. The back line is pretty much going to be the same heading into this season, and especially if Steve Clark can have another season where the good thing about goalkeepers is that even though he is 38, goalkeepers can still be at their best even into their late 30s. And if you have another good season, this Dynamo team could be really solid in terms of their midfield and the defense. Now the problem is that the biggest weakness I would say about this team is got to be that regression, the lack of nine, and I would even say probably just that lack of goal scored on this team. I mean, I mentioned before in the Moving Forward series episode about the Houston Dynamo, a team that yes, they rely on a lot of their player kind of contribute, kind of almost follow the same moniker that RSL do, which is the team is the star on the attack. They have multiple kind of players that can make an impact. What would happen if some of those players suffer a regression, and especially they have lost a key attacking pieces of Corey Bear? That's going to be interesting to see how they're going to replace him in that number 9 spot. And again, when you look at this number 9 spot, there is a lot of question mark about this team. I mean, I think Sebastian Ferreira he's going to become coming back on this team, or no? He of course. Actually, I'm not sure. Did he get sold? I don't think he's been sold yet. So I think he's going to be back in this team, and you wonder, is he going to be the guy up front, even though he's been pretty much in the doghouse of Ben Olsen ever since Ben Olsen took charge of this team. So again, the regression is my biggest concern and the lack of number 9. But obviously, I think the other big concern you got to say about this Houston Dynamo team, no reinforcement whatsoever. Again, when you run it back in with a team, usually the teams that like to run it back, it really depends on how good your team is. And when you look at this Houston Dynamo team, yes, there are some good pieces that they can get themselves back in the playoffs, but I can't tell you that when I look at this team, is this team going to go even further than what we saw last season, especially with the way that there's a lot of question mark on the on the lack of number 9 and the fact that they didn't make any improvement. And we've seen before when teams don't make improvement and other gets stronger, yeah, you're going to be left behind. It does. But that being said, in terms of expectation, obviously it's make the playoffs again. I mean, it's been a long time since the Dynamo had made it to the playoffs prior to last season. They want to make it a regular trend, just like what we seen in the early 2010s, where regular playoff contender and a regular MLS Cup contender too, because they reached multiple MLS Cup in their early days in MLS, and they're looking to try to do the same thing. But also they're looking to try to get a big transfer fee for some of their outbound player, and those guys is one of those guys is definitely Coco Carrasquilla. It's gonna be interesting to see how much the Dynamo is going to accept as the offer, and especially when is he going to leave this team, because he is a linchpin to this midfield, and losing him is going to be a huge subtraction, to a point where this is where I talk about the regression and the lack of reinforcement to it. But either way, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this season preview? If you're a Dynamo fan, what do you think is the strength, the weakness, and what's your expectation heading into this upcoming season? But till then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.